The metal hallway was cold and dark. A low hum vibrated through the floor, the sound of the great alien ship, the judgment of cracks moving through space. A young man named Jin walked slowly down the hallway. His shoulders were slumped and his plain gray worker's suit was stained with oil. His feet were quiet on the hard floor. He was a prisoner. He was a slave. An enormous Cathar guard stood at the end of the hallway. The Cathar were a race of conquerors. They were tall with thick green scales and sharp teeth. This one looked at Jin with yellow, slitted eyes. It did not speak. It just pointed a long, clawed finger toward a heavy doorway. Jin nodded and went through the door. It led into a massive room called the engineering bay. It was the heart of the ship. Giant machines pumped and whirred. Wires and pipes covered the walls like metal snakes. The air smelled of ozone and hot metal. This was where Jin worked. Every day for 16 hours a day he fixed the machines that kept the Cathar ship flying. The Cathar were strong and fierce in battle, but their technology was complicated and often broke. They had discovered that humans, especially ones like Jin, were good at fixing things, so they took him from his home. They took him from his family. They put him to work. Jin walked to his station. It was a control panel for the ship's plasma conduits. Plasma was like the ship's blood, and these conduits carried it to the engines and weapons. The panel was a mess of blinking lights and tangled wires. A Cathar engineer stood nearby looking confused and angry. The machine was not working. The Cathar engineer grunted and shoved Jin toward the panel. "Fix it, human," he snarled in his rough language. The translator on his belt repeated the words in basic English. Jin did not look at him. He just looked at the machine. He placed his hands on the panel. His hands, which looked thin and weak next to the Cathar's claws, began to move. They moved with a quiet confidence. His fingers traced the wires. His eyes watched the pattern of the lights. In his mind, he was not in this dark, noisy room. He was back in his small apartment on New Daegu. He was taking apart a broken computer screen and putting it back together, just for fun. His sister Mireille was sitting nearby reading a book. She would look up sometimes and smile at him. "You can see the music in the wires, can't you, Jin?" she would say. The memory was like a small, warm light inside him. He held onto it tightly. He found the problem. A small regulator chip had burned out. It was a part the Cathar engineers had overlooked. They always looked for big, loud problems. Jin saw the small, quiet ones. He found a replacement chip and slotted it into place. The panel lights stopped blinking erratically. They glowed a steady, calm blue. The low hum of the plasma flow returned to normal. The Cathar engineer snorted. He did not say thank you. He just turned and walked away. To him, Jin was a tool. A smart tool, but still just a tool. Jin was alone again. This was when his real work began. He pretended to clean the panel. He wiped it with a cloth, but his eyes were scanning the area. He made sure no one was watching. Then his fingers moved to a hidden port underneath the main console. It was a port the Cathar did not know about. He had discovered it months ago. From a secret pocket inside his sleeve, he took out a small data spike. It was a tiny piece of technology he had built from stolen parts. He plugged it into the hidden port. The spike began to copy information. It copied maps of the ship's wiring. It copied codes for the door controls. It copied the schedule for the guards. This was his rebellion. It was a silent secret war. While the Cathar thought he was serving them, he was actually learning all their secrets. He was finding their weaknesses. He was not trying to escape. Escape was impossible. He was doing this for another reason. He was creating a weapon for the day when other humans might come. Suddenly, a loud alarm blared through the engineering bay. It was a battle station's alarm. Red lights flashed on the walls. Jin's heart jumped. He quickly pulled out the data spike and hid it. He stood up, trying to look like a scared, obedient worker. Over the ship's communication system, a voice boomed. It was the voice of General Krax, the commander of the ship. His voice was deep and full of cruel pride. "All crews, battle stations," the voice said. "We have intercepted a human vessel. We will show them the power of the Cathar Imperium. We will break them." Jin felt a chill. Another human ship. Another group of people like him, about to be destroyed or captured. A feeling of hopelessness washed over him. What was the point of his small rebellion? The Cathar were too powerful. He could do nothing but wait and work. For hours he stayed at his station, monitoring the plasma flow as the ship prepared for battle. He felt the deep thrum of the weapons charging. He felt the ship change direction. Then there was a brief, distant shudder. A fight had happened. It did not last long. Later, the main doors of the engineering bay hissed open. General Krax himself walked in. He was huge, even for a Cathar. His scales were covered in battle scars. His eyes glowed with a cold light. He walked through the bay, and all the Cathar engineers stood straight and bowed their heads. Krax stopped near Jin. He looked down at the young human. Jin kept his eyes on the floor. "This one," Krax said, his voice a low rumble. He pointed a claw at Jin. "He is a good example. He knows his place. He serves a greater purpose. The humans who fight, they are fools. They will learn." Krax continued his walk and then left the bay. He had not even waited for a response. He was just stating a fact, like talking about the weather. The words burned inside Jin. He did not serve them. He was pretending. He was waiting. That night, in the dark, cramped cell where he slept, Jin lay on his hard bed. He looked at a small, crumpled photo he kept hidden. It was a picture of him and his sister, Mireille. They were both smiling. She had her arm around his shoulder. She always protected him. Mireille was smart and strong. She was in the Earth Defense Fleet. He did not know if she was alive or dead. He hoped she was safe. He hoped she was far, far away from this terrible war. He held on to the picture and made a promise. He would not give up. He would keep fighting his quiet war. He would keep collecting information. He would make this ship vulnerable. One day the Cathar would make a mistake. And when they did, he would be ready. He would turn their own ship against them. It was a small hope, a tiny flame in the overwhelming darkness. But it was all he had. It was enough to keep him going for one more day. The air on the ship changed after the battle. It became sharper, more tense. The Cathar guards walked with more swagger. They had won another easy victory. For Jin, the days became a blur of work and fear. He heard whispers among the other human workers. The ship that was captured was called the Star Runner. Its crew was now prisoners, just like him. A few days later, the order came. All human workers were to report to the main hangar bay. Jin's stomach felt tight. Nothing good ever happened when General Krax gathered everyone together. The hangar bay was enormous. It was a cold gray space big enough to hold small fighter ships. Now it was filled with people. On one side, standing in neat rows, were the human workers in their gray suits. Their faces were tired and scared. On the other side, guarded by Cathar soldiers with heavy rifles, was the new group. The crew of the Star Runner. They stood in their ripped blue uniforms. Some were hurt. All of them looked defiant. Then General Krax arrived. He walked onto a raised platform so everyone could see him. His heavy boots echoed in the vast space. He looked over the crowd of humans, his scaly face showing no emotion. "You are all here to learn." His voice boomed through the translators. "You see these new faces? They thought they could fight. They thought they were strong." He pointed a long claw at the crew of the Star Runner. They were wrong. Look at them now. Broken, defeated. Jin stood with the other workers. He kept his head down, but his eyes watched everything. He saw the anger on the faces of the new prisoners. He also saw the hopelessness on the faces of the workers. This was what Krax wanted. He wanted to crush their spirit. "Your species is weak," Krax continued, walking slowly along the edge of the platform. "You are soft. You have feelings. This makes you fragile. We Cathar are strong because we feel nothing but the will to conquer." His eyes scanned the crowd and then stopped. They stopped on Jin. "You," Krax said. "The little engineer." "Step forward." A cold fear shot through Jin. For a moment, he could not move. A guard shoved him from behind, and he stumbled forward into the empty space between the workers and the platform. All eyes were on him. Krax looked down at him. "You fix our machines. You are useful. You have accepted your place in the universe. You serve the strong. Tell them." He gestured to the new prisoners. "Tell them it is easier to obey." Jin's mouth was dry. He said nothing. He just stared at the floor. He could feel the gaze of the new prisoners. He felt shame burn his cheeks. He was not obeying. He was waiting. But they did not know that. To them, he looked like a collaborator. Krax laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "He does not need to speak. His actions speak for him. He works for us. He helps us. This is the future of humanity. To serve the Cathar Imperium." Then, Krax turned his attention back to the Star Runner crew. He focused on a young woman who was staring back at him with pure hatred. She had a cut on her forehead, but she stood straight. "You," Crack said to her. "You still have fire in your eyes. That is a sickness. It must be burned away." He nodded to one of his guards. The guard stepped toward the young woman. "No!" a man from the crew shouted, stepping in front of her. The Cathar guard did not hesitate. He swung the heavy butt of his rifle. The sound of it hitting the man's head was sickening. The man cried out and fell to the floor, holding his face. Blood seeped through his fingers. A wave of panic and anger went through the crowd of prisoners. Something broke inside Jin. The man on the floor looked like his old teacher. The sound of the blow was the sound of every injustice, every moment of fear, every lost friend. The quiet, careful plan in his mind was swept away by a tidal wave of rage. He saw the Cathar guard who had hit the man turn his back. The guard's control pad for the hangar's magnetic field was clipped to his belt. Jin's body moved before his mind could catch up. He wasn't a thinker anymore. He was a reaction. He lunged. It wasn't an attack on the guard. He wasn't a fighter. He dove for the control pad. His fingers, so clever with wires, found the release button. He ripped the pad from the guard's belt. The guard roared and turned, his claws slashing through the air. But Jin was already rolling away. He scrambled toward the wall, the control pad in his hand. Alarms blared. Shouts filled the air. "Stop him!" Cracks bellowed. His calm performance shattered. Jin's eyes found the main control for the hangar's magnetic containment field. It was a large red button behind a clear shield. He didn't have time to use the stolen pad. He slammed his elbow through the thin plastic shield and smashed his fist down on the button. For a split second, nothing happened. Then the world went sideways. The powerful magnetic field that held everything to the floor suddenly shut off. Tools, crates, loose parts, and even people lifted into the air. The Cathar, who were heavy, floated up slowly. The humans, lighter, tumbled and spun in the sudden zero gravity. It was chaos, a floating storm of metal and bodies. Guards flailed, trying to swim through the air. Prisoners grabbed onto pipes to steady themselves. The huge lights swung wildly, casting crazy moving shadows. Jin floated near the ceiling, his heart pounding. He saw the Cathar guards struggling. He saw the prisoners using the confusion to fight back, grabbing floating tools and using them as weapons. He had done it. He had fought back, but the feeling of triumph lasted only a moment. A powerful hand closed around his ankle. It was the guard he had stolen the pad from. The Cathar's face was a mask of pure fury. He pulled Jin down like he was a toy. The beating was swift and brutal. Fists and claws slammed into Jin. He felt a rib crack. His vision flashed white, then red. He couldn't breathe. He was just a sack of pain. Through a blurry, swollen eye, he saw the hangar. He saw the prisoners putting up a fight. He saw the confusion he had created. It was a small victory, a tiny spark in the dark. As the guards finally restored the gravity and everything crashed to the floor, Jin lay in a heap. The Cathar guard stood over him, ready to strike again. "Enough." General Crax's voice cut through the noise. Crax walked over and looked down at Jin's broken body. He did not look angry anymore. He looked pleased. "You see?" Crax said to everyone, his voice loud and clear. "Even the quiet ones have a breaking point. And when they break, they are easily crushed. Take this one to the brig. Let him rot." As two guards dragged Jin away, his head lolled back. The world was fading in and out. But as he passed the crew of the Star Runner, he saw them looking at him. Their faces were not full of scorn anymore. They were full of respect. The young woman he had tried to protect gave him a small, firm nod. It was then, through the blinding pain, that Jin managed a small, bloody smile. He had sent the signal. The spark was lit. His sister had always told him that even the smallest spark could start a fire. He held on to that thought as the darkness swallowed him. Time lost its meaning in the brig. It was a small, dark box of a room with a cold metal bench and no window. Jin lay on the bench, hurting with every breath. His face was swollen. His body was a map of purple and blue bruises. The Cathar guards had not been gentle when they threw him in here. They gave him just enough food and water to keep him alive. A slot would open in the door, a tray would be pushed through, and the slot would slam shut. No words were spoken. Jin spent his days drifting in and out of sleep. When he was awake, he thought about his actions in the hangar. Had it been stupid? Probably. He had thrown away his careful plan for one moment of anger. He was no use to anyone locked in this cell. But then he remembered the look on the faces of the other prisoners. The respect. The spark of hope. He had shown them that the Cathar could be challenged, that they were not all powerful. Maybe that was worth the pain. Weeks passed. His body slowly began to heal. The sharp pain in his rib became a dull ache. The swelling on his face went down. He could think more clearly. He thought about his secret program, the one he had hidden deep in the ship's computers. He had activated it in that final, desperate moment in the hangar. It was a simple program. It did not attack. It did not shut anything down. It was a listening program, a waiting program. It was called a ghost. Its only job was to find a very specific quiet signal from outside the ship. A signal that no Cathar sensor would ever notice. It was a signal that only one person in the universe would think to send. It was his sister's signal. Mireille was out there somewhere. He had to believe that. And if she was, she would be looking for him. She would never stop. One day, the usual routine changed. The food slot did not open. Instead, the heavy door of his cell hissed open. Bright light from the hallway flooded in, making Jin squint. A Cathar guard stood there. "Get up, the general wants to see you." Jin's heart sank. What did Krax want with him now? To make another example of him? To finish the job his guard started? He was led through the familiar hallways of the ship. He saw that things had changed. There were more guards. They looked more alert, more tense. Something was happening. He was taken not to the hangar, but to the bridge. It was the first time he had ever been there. It was a huge circular room with wide view screens showing the blackness of space and a field of stars. Cathar officers sat at complex consoles, their claws tapping on controls. In the center of the room stood General Krax. He was looking at the main view screen. He looked annoyed. Jin followed his gaze to the screen. There, hanging in the void, was a single ship. It was not a Cathar ship. It was a human ship, but it was like no human ship Jin had ever seen. It was long and sleek like a silver needle. It had no visible heavy weapons. It just sat there perfectly still as if it were waiting. "What is it?" Krax growled to one of his officers. "It is a human vessel, General. Its transponder identifies it as the UED's Vanguard. It is a new class. We have no data on it. One ship?" Krax laughed, a short, harsh bark. "Is this their rescue attempt? Their desperation is pathetic." He turned and noticed Jin being held by the guard. A cruel smile touched his lips. "Good, bring him here. Let him see this foolishness." Krax turned back to the screen. "Open a channel to that ship." A moment later, the main view screen changed. It showed the bridge of the human vessel. It was clean and bright, and standing in the center was a woman. She wore a simple blue uniform. Her black hair was tied back neatly. Her hands were clasped behind her back. Her face was calm, completely calm. She looked like she was waiting for a bus, not facing a massive Cathar battlecruiser. Jin's breath caught in his throat. His heart felt like it would beat out of his chest. He knew that face. He had dreamed of that face. It was older, harder, but it was her, Mireille. General Krax sneered at the image. "Human vessel, you are in Cathar space. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will be met with annihilation." The woman on the screen, Mireille, did not react to the threat. Her eyes were focused. They scanned the Cathar bridge and then stopped. They stopped on Jin. For a fraction of a second, her calm expression flickered. He saw a flash of pain, of anger, of relief. Then it was gone, replaced by that icy calm. Her gaze moved to General Krax. "General Krax," she said. Her voice was even and clear. It was the same voice that used to read him stories when he was sick. "You have something of mine. My brother Jin. Release him and your crew will be granted the mercy of surrender." A silence fell over the Cathar bridge. The officers looked at each other in disbelief. Then Krax let out a roaring laugh. "Surrender?" he boomed. "You are a fool. I will crush your little ship and add you to my collection. You can join your brother in the brig." Mireille's lips curved into a very small, very cold smile. It was not a friendly smile. It was a promise. "You shouldn't have touched my brother," she said softly. The channel closed. The screen went back to showing the silent silver ship. Krax was fuming. The audacity of this human had insulted him. "Weapons! Lock on target! Destroy that ship!" Jin stood, his body trembling. He was not afraid for himself anymore. He was terrified for Mireille. She was alone. She was outgunned. What was she doing? But as he looked at her ship, a memory clicked in his mind. Her signal. The ghost program he had planted. She was not here to fight with guns. She was here because he had called her. His spark in the hangar had been the signal. She had received it. And she had come. She was not here to blast the door down. She was here because he had already unlocked it from the inside. General Krax turned away from the screen, confident of his victory. He looked at Jin, a trophy of his power. "You see, little human," Krax said. "Your people are sentimental. It makes them weak. She came for you, and now she will die for you." Jin looked at the general. For the first time, he did not look at the floor. He met the general's gaze. He did not say a word, but inside a strange feeling was growing. It was not hope. It was certainty. He knew his sister. She did not make empty threats. She had not come here to die. She had come here to win. General Krax stood on his bridge, a king in his castle. He pointed a sharp claw at the view screen. The human ship, the Vanguard, hung in space like a silent fish waiting to be eaten. "Fire all forward cannons," Krax commanded, his voice full of thunder. The weapons officer pressed the controls. Nothing happened. The officer pressed them again, harder. A warning light flashed on his console. Red, angry. "General, weapons are not responding. System failure." Krax spun around. "What, how?" Before anyone could answer, the lights on the bridge flickered. The steady hum of the ship's engine stuttered, coughed, and then died. The sound was replaced by an eerie, deep silence. The only light now came from the emergency strips on the floor, casting a dim red glow. The main view screen went black. The consoles where the officers sat shut down one by one. The cool processed air stopped flowing. The bridge became still and hot. "Report," Krax roared into the sudden quiet. His voice sounded small now. "Primary power is offline," an officer shouted. "Backup systems are not engaging. It is a complete failure." Panic began to spread through the bridge crew. They tapped at dead screens. They pulled at unresponsive switches. Their claws, so good for fighting, were useless against this invisible enemy. Jin stood near the wall, his guard forgotten in the chaos. He allowed himself a small, tight smile in the darkness. This was his work. The ghost program he had planted had been waiting, and Mirai had just given it the final command. It was not an attack from the outside. It was a sickness from within. He had spent months making the ship sick, and his sister had just told the sickness to wake up. Alarms started blaring in the hallways outside the bridge. Not the clean, sharp battle station's alarm. This was a ragged, screaming sound, a death rattle. Through the bridge's main door they could hear shouts and crashes. The internal communication system crackled to life for a second with a frantic voice. "Life support is failing in Sector 7. Bulkheads are sealing randomly. We are trapped." General Krax stared at the black view screen. He could see his own reflection, a confused and angry face in the dim red light. This was not a battle. This was a dismantling. His great war machine, the judgment of Krax, was being taken apart like a broken toy. He turned slowly. His yellow eyes, wide with a feeling he had never known, scanned the dark bridge. They found Jin still standing calmly. Then they moved to the main screen, which was now just a dark mirror. He was not looking at a fleet. He was not looking at a bomb. He was defeated by a silence, by a single calm woman on a silent ship. His mind could not understand it. His strength meant nothing. His weapons meant nothing. He had been outsmarted. He had been tricked by the quiet brother and defeated by the calm sister. He pointed a trembling claw at the dark screen where Mirai's image had been. Who are you?" General Krax inquired. His voice was a hoarse whisper. All the pride and power was gone. Now he just sounded lost and scared. As if in answer, the main view screen flickered back to life. It did not show the stars. It showed the bridge of the Vanguard again. Mirai was still there. She stood in the same spot. Her uniform was still neat. Her hair was still perfect. On her ship, the lights were still on. Everything was normal. The contrast was terrifying. She looked at General Krax. She saw the fear on his face. She saw the red emergency lights. She saw his broken bridge. On the screen, Mirai smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. It was not a happy smile. It was the baring of teeth. It was a look that promised the story was over and she had written the ending. "I'm his sister," she said, her voice clean and clear over the dying ship's alarms. "And your doom." The screen went black again. The words hung in the thick, hot air of the bridge. "I'm his sister. And your doom." For Jin, those words were a warm blanket. They were a light in the dark. They were the sound of home. She had come for him. She had kept her promise. For Cracks, the words were a death sentence. They were cold and final. He finally understood. He had not been fighting a soldier. He had been fighting a force of nature. He had hurt her family, and she had erased him from existence without even firing a shot. He looked at Jin, the quiet, broken boy he had ignored. He saw the intelligence in his eyes now. He saw the strength he had mistaken for weakness. He had not captured a slave. He had captured a seed, and that seed had grown into a vine that was now choking the life out of his ship. The main door to the bridge hissed open, but it was not Cathar guards. Standing in the doorway were humans in black combat armor. They held sleek rifles. Their faces were hard and determined. They moved into the room with smooth professional steps. The few Cathar on the bridge who tried to resist were quickly and efficiently disabled with precise stun shots. The battle for the judgment of Cracks was over. It had not been a battle at all. The leader of the human soldiers walked up to General Cracks. The general, the great warrior, did nothing. He was defeated. The human soldier took a pair of heavy metal binders and clipped them around the general's thick wrists. As Cracks was led away, he passed Jin. He stopped for a moment and looked at the young man. "How?" was all the general could rasp. Jin looked back at him. He thought of all the long, lonely days, all the secret work, all the fear. "You saw my hands," Jin said quietly, "but you never saw my mind, and you never saw my sister." General Cracks was led off the bridge, a prisoner in his own castle. The mighty had fallen, and they had been brought down not by a fist but by a thought, not by an army but by a family. The bridge of the judgment of Cracks was no longer a place of fear. The red emergency lights were still on, but now they lit a scene of quiet order. Human soldiers in black armor stood at the doorways. They spoke in calm voices into their communicators, coordinating the securement of the massive ship. Jin stood in the same spot, watching it all. He felt light, as if he might float away. The constant weight of dread that had lived in his stomach for so long was gone. It was a strange and wonderful feeling. Then the main bridge doors opened again. Mireille walked in. She was not running. She walked with a steady, confident pace. Her eyes scanned the room, checking on her soldiers, assessing the situation. But then her gaze found him, and everything else in the room seemed to disappear. She crossed the distance between them in a few quick steps. Her cool commander's face melted away. In its place was the face of the big sister who had taught him how to ride a bike. Her eyes were shiny with tears she would not let fall. "Jin," she said, her voice soft. It was just his name, but in that one word he heard all her worry, her search, her relief. He tried to stand straighter to show her he was okay. But a sharp pain from his ribs made him wince. Mireille saw it. Her eyes went from his face to the faded bruises on his cheek. She saw the way he held his side. Her expression hardened for a second, a flash of the storm that had just defeated a Cathar general. Then it softened again. She didn't hug him. She knew it would hurt him. Instead, she put a hand on his shoulder. It was a firm, solid touch, a grounding touch. "You found my signal," Jin said. It was half a question, half a statement. "I always listen for you," she replied. "When that ghost program activated, it was like a lighthouse in the dark. We followed it straight to you." She looked around the dead bridge. "You did this, Jin. You built the key." "I just had to turn it," he shook his head. "I just made a mess. You knew how to use it." A soldier approached Mireille. "Commander, the ship is secure. All Cathar personnel are contained. The human prisoners are being gathered in the main hangar for medical checks and evacuation." "Thank you, Lieutenant," Mireille said, her voice all business again. "Prepare the general for transport. I will speak with him before he is taken to the brig on the Vanguard." The soldier nodded and left. Mireille led Jin off the bridge. They walked through the hallways that had been his prison. Now they were just hallways. Human soldiers stood where Cathar guards used to be. They nodded with respect to Mireille and looked at Jin with curiosity and admiration. They entered the hangar bay. It was the same place where Jin's rebellion had begun. It looked different now. The chaos was gone. Human medics were tending to the prisoners. People were talking, some were even smiling. The air was filled with the sound of hope. When Jin walked in, a silence fell over the crowd. Then someone started to clap. It was one of the crewmen from the Star Runner. Then another person joined in. Soon the entire hangar was filled with the sound of applause. It was not loud or wild. It was a steady, respectful sound. They were applauding for the quiet engineer who had fought back. Jin felt his face grow warm. He looked at the floor, embarrassed. Mirai squeezed his shoulder, a small, proud smile on her face. In a corner of the hangar under guard stood General Krax. His wrists were still bound. He watched the scene with dull eyes. He saw the humans helping each other. He saw the broken boy being treated like a hero. He did not understand. Mirai walked over to him. Jin stood slightly behind her. Krax looked up at her. The mighty general was gone. In his place was a tired, defeated creature. "You are a monster," Krax whispered to Mirai. Mirai looked at him, her head tilted. "No, General. You are a monster. You believe strength is causing fear. You believe power is taking what you want." She gestured to the people in the hangar. "You see our bodies and you think we are weak. You see us care for each other and you think it is a flaw." She took a step closer, her voice low and clear. "You were wrong. My brother's mind was a weapon you could not see. My love for him was a fuel you could not understand. You break one of us, you awaken all of us." She looked at Jin, then back at Krax. "That is humanity. Our strength is not in our fists. It is in our bonds. You hurt my brother, so I walked onto your ship and I took it from you. Not with a blast, but with a thought. That is our power." General Krax had no answer. His entire world, his beliefs, lay in pieces around him. He had been conquered by something he still could not see. He was led away to a waiting transport shuttle. Jin and Mirai watched him go. The noise of the hangar returned around them. "What happens now?" Jin asked. "Now," Mirai said, turning to him. "Now we go home." She led him toward a shuttle that had the Earth flag painted on its side. The sunlight from the open hangar door was bright and warm. It was the first real, unfiltered light Jin had seen in a very long time. He stopped for a moment at the ramp of the shuttle and looked back at the dark, dead Cathar ship. It was just a hollow shell now. A ghost. He was not that person anymore. He was not the scared slave. He was Jin, the engineer, the brother. He turned away from the darkness and walked up the ramp into the light, his sister by his side. They were going home,